Let me tell you something nobody prepares you for. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a house when a man has already left, but his shoes are still by the door. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not even angry. It's just hollow. I was 7 months pregnant when my husband walked out. 7 months. You know how heavy 7 months feels? Your back hurts, your ankles swell, you can't see your own feet anymore, and every emotion, Lord have mercy, every emotion feels like it's turned up to volume 10. And that was the day he said, I can't do this anymore. Now, let me pause right here. Have you ever noticed how I can't do this anymore usually means I don't want to do this anymore? Because there's a difference. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even ask him to stay. And maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe it was my strength. See, Marcus had been distant for months, staying late at work, guarding his phone like it was Fort Knox, starting arguments over nothing. One night he told me I chewed too loud. Chewed too loud. I said, Marcus, I'm pregnant, not auditioning for a library. But he didn't laugh. That's when I knew something was already gone. By the time he packed his bag that Tuesday evening, he wasn't angry. He wasn't even emotional. He was relieved. Relieved. While I stood there holding my belly, holding our daughter, feeling her shift inside me like she knew something had changed. Where are you going? I asked. He didn't answer directly, just said, I need peace. Peace? Now, I don't know who told men that pregnancy is a disturbance of peace, but I'd like to have a word. He kissed my forehead like I was a cousin at a family reunion, picked up his suitcase, and walked out the front door. And just like that, I was alone. But here's what nobody tells you about being left while pregnant. The baby still kicks. The laundry still piles up. The rent is still due. And your heart? Your heart doesn't get maternity leave. I sat down that night on the edge of the bed, his side still warm, and I made a decision. I would not beg a man to love me, even if it broke me. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly know, was that 18 years later, on a Sunday morning in the very church where I prayed for strength after he left, Marcus would walk through those double doors, and he wouldn't look relieved. He would look destroyed. But before we get there, you need to understand what those 18 years cost me, because survival isn't pretty. And forgiveness? Forgiveness has a long memory. The first night alone, I didn't cry. Isn't that strange? You'd think I would have collapsed into some dramatic movie scene breakdown. But no. I sat at the kitchen table eating vanilla ice cream straight out of the carton because when you're 7 months pregnant, dignity is optional. And I just stared at the wall. You ever stare at a wall so long it starts feeling like it's staring back at you? That was me. I kept replaying his words. I need peace. As if I was chaos, as if the baby was noise, as if responsibility was an inconvenience you could unsubscribe from. But here's the part nobody talks about. When a man leaves you pregnant, people don't just look at him differently, they look at you differently too. Suddenly there are whispers. Well, what happened? Did she push him away? You know men don't just leave for no reason. Oh yes, they do. Sometimes the reason is immaturity. Sometimes the reason is fear. Sometimes the reason is another woman who doesn't have swollen ankles. But I didn't defend myself. I didn't chase rumors. I didn't even correct folks when they said, I'm so sorry he left y'all. Y'all. Like he left both of us. No. He left responsibility. I was still here. Now let me tell you about pregnancy cravings when your husband just walked out. You'd think I'd crave chocolate or pickles. No, ma'am. I craved security. I craved stability. I craved someone to say, "You're not crazy. This isn't your fault." Instead, I went to work. Yes, I was still working. 8-hour shifts, swollen feet tucked under a desk, pretending everything was fine. One day, my coworker Denise looked at me and said, "You glowin'." I said, "That's not glow, that's stress and cocoa butter." But humor was my shield. If I could joke, I could breathe. The hardest part wasn't the bills. It wasn't the stairs. It wasn't even sleeping alone. It was the quiet at night, when the baby moved. She would stretch inside me like she was testing the boundaries of her little world, and I'd put my hand on my belly and whisper, "It's just us, baby girl." That's when I allowed myself to cry. Not for him, for her, because she deserved a father who stayed. And let me say something gently to anyone listening who's been there. You can survive abandonment, but surviving doesn't mean it didn't scar you. I stopped calling Marcus after the 3rd week. Pride? Maybe. Self-preservation? Definitely. He sent one text 2 months later. "How's the pregnancy?" The pregnancy. Like it was a weather update. I stared at that message for an hour before replying. "She's healthy." That's all he got. No emotion, no anger, just facts. Because I was learning something important. Silence can be power, but silence can also be a wound that heals crooked. And I didn't realize at the time the way I survived those months would shape the woman I became, and it would shape the daughter I was about to raise. But here's what changed everything. 3 weeks before my due date, I got a phone call, and the voice on the other end wasn't Marcus. It was a woman, and she knew my name. 3 weeks before my due date, my phone rang at 8:42 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had just propped my swollen feet up on a pillow and told myself, "You made it through another day." The number was unfamiliar. Now let me ask you something. Why is it that bad news always comes from an unknown number? I almost didn't answer, but something in my spirit said, "Pick it up." So I did. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice. Soft. Controlled. Too controlled. "Is this Alana?" My stomach tightened. "Yes?" Another pause. "This is Tasha." And just like that, my body knew before my mind caught up. Tasha. I didn't know her personally, but I knew of her. The coworker Marcus had mentioned one too many times, the project partner, the "she's just helping me with something." That Tasha. She cleared her throat. "I think you deserve to know the truth." Now isn't that interesting? The woman sleeping with your husband suddenly wants to discuss what you deserve? But I stayed quiet. She continued, "Marcus and we've been together for almost a year." A year? I was 6 months pregnant when he left. Do that math. Go ahead, I'll wait. That means while I was picking out crib sheets, he was picking out her. I pressed my hand against my belly as my daughter shifted inside me. Tasha kept talking. Something about how she didn't want to start a relationship based on lies. Something about him promising he would handle things. Handle things. Like I was paperwork. Then she said something I will never forget. He said you were too emotional, that the pregnancy changed you. Changed me? Of course it changed me. I was growing a human. What was he growing? Excuses? But here's what hurt the most. It wasn't that he cheated. It wasn't even that he left. It was that he rewrote our story to justify it. Made me the villain in a chapter I didn't even know we were writing. When Tasha finally stopped talking, she asked quietly, "Did you know?" And I surprised myself. I said, "Yes." Silence. Because in truth, I had known. Maybe not the details, maybe not her name, but I knew. Women know. We feel distance before it has language. We notice the shift in eye contact, the delayed responses, the way laughter disappears. I thanked her. Yes, I thanked her, because confirmation is a strange kind of freedom. After I hung up, I didn't scream. I didn't call Marcus. I walked into the nursery, half-painted walls and all, and I sat in that rocking chair. And for the first time, I let myself grieve the marriage. Not the man, the dream, the picture I had painted in my head of a family of 3. I cried so hard that night, my ribs hurt. But somewhere between the tears and the exhaustion, something inside me hardened. Not bitterness, clarity. Marcus didn't leave because I was emotional. He left because he was unprepared to love someone who required him to grow. And growth terrifies small men. But here's the twist. Tasha wasn't calling to confess out of guilt. She was calling because something else had happened, something that would change the trajectory of the next 18 years. Because 2 days after that phone call, Marcus lost his job. And guess who he tried to call? 2 days after Tasha's phone call, Marcus lost his job. Now, let me just say this gently. Consequences have a way of arriving without knocking, and apparently, unemployment showed up right on time. My phone rang 3 times that afternoon. Marcus? Marcus? Marcus. I let it ring. Now, before anyone says that's petty, let me explain something. There is a difference between being petty and protecting your peace, and I had just started learning the difference. He left me 7 months pregnant claiming he needed peace. Well, peace had finally found me, and it didn't include answering his crisis calls. He left a voicemail. Alana, hey, I just need to talk. Things are complicated right now. I didn't expect this. Can you call me back? Complicated. Isn't it amazing how life becomes complicated when accountability shows up? I sat there staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to answer. Part of me wanted to ask, did Tasha's peace expire? But I didn't. Instead, I did something radical. I folded baby clothes. Yes, folded tiny little socks that looked like they belonged on a doll. Because here's the truth. Motherhood was already demanding my focus, and I refused to let his instability interrupt the stability I was building. But I won't lie to you. That night, I wrestled. You ever lay in bed arguing with someone who isn't even there? Oh, I had a full debate in my head. Maybe I should call him. What if he wants to fix things? What if my daughter deserves her father trying? Then another voice whispered, trying now that it's hard? That voice was wisdom, and wisdom doesn't shout. It just sits quietly until you're ready to listen. I didn't call him back, and 3 weeks later, I went into labor. At 2:13 in the morning, my water broke. Not dramatically, not like the movies, just a quiet realization that it was time. I drove myself to the hospital. Yes, you heard that right. 7 months abandoned, 9 months pregnant, and I drove myself. The nurse asked, "Is the father on his way?" I smiled. "No, ma'am, it's just us." And when my daughter entered this world crying strong, fists tight like she was ready to fight anybody who tried her, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not sadness, power. Because abandonment didn't stop her arrival, it didn't weaken her lungs, it didn't steal her purpose. I named her Naomi. It means pleasant, because I refused to let her story begin with bitterness. Marcus sent flowers 2 days later. Yellow roses. Now listen, if you ever leave a woman pregnant, do not send yellow roses. That is not the moment for friendship flowers. He included a note. "She's beautiful. I'm sorry for everything."
Everything. Such a small word for such a large wound. But here's where the story really turns, because raising Naomi alone wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part came years later, when she started asking questions. And children? Children don't whisper their questions. They ask them loud.
Naomi was 5 the first time she asked about her father. 5. She was sitting at the kitchen table coloring a picture of what I assumed was our family. There was a stick figure with curly hair, that was her, a taller stick figure with braids, that was me, and then there was empty space. She looked up at me, crayon in hand, and asked, "Mommy, where's my daddy?" Now, let me tell you something. There are questions you can prepare for. What's for dinner? Why is the sky blue? Can I have a puppy? But that question? That one lands in your chest. I sat down across from her and chose my words carefully, because bitterness is heavy, and I refused to pack it into her little backpack. "He lives somewhere else," I said gently. She nodded, like that made sense. Then she asked, "Did he not want to live with us?" Children don't tiptoe, do they? They walk straight into truth without shoes on. I swallowed. "He didn't know how to be the kind of daddy you deserved." That was the closest I could get to honesty without wounding her. And here's what surprised me. She didn't cry. She just went back to coloring. Because to Naomi, absence was normal. And that realization hurt more than anything. You see, when someone leaves during pregnancy, the child doesn't remember the leaving. They grow up thinking the gap was always there, like a missing tooth they learn to chew around. Marcus saw her occasionally during those early years, birthdays, a Christmas here and there, always inconsistent, always brief. He'd show up with big gifts, bicycles too tall, dolls too expensive, trying to buy what he didn't build. And I used to laugh to myself, because you can't wrap presents in shiny paper. Now, here's a little humor break for you. One year, he bought her a drum set. A drum set for my house. I said, "Oh, so now you want to make noise." But Naomi loved it, and I let her bang those drums until the walls shook, because silence had already done enough damage in our lives. As Naomi grew older, she stopped asking about him as much. But I noticed something else. She became fiercely independent, didn't like asking for help, didn't trust promises easily, kept her feelings tucked away. And every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering, did my survival teach her strength, or did it teach her guardedness? There's a difference. Marcus eventually moved out of state, remarried, started over, or at least that's what mutual friends told me. I didn't stalk his life. I was too busy building ours, working 2 jobs sometimes, making sure Naomi had piano lessons, church on Sundays, homework then at the table. We created rhythms, stability, peace, the very thing he said he needed. But here's the part I didn't see coming. When Naomi turned 16, Marcus reached out again. Not with flowers, not with apologies, but with a request. And what he asked for? I wasn't prepared to answer. Naomi had just turned 16 when Marcus called again. 16. Driver's permit, college brochures, attitude that rotated depending on the day. And just when life felt steady, here he comes. His voice sounded older, less confident, less polished. "Alana, I was hoping I could see Naomi, spend some real time with her." Real time. I almost laughed. You ever notice how people want real time after they've missed all the small moments? The lost teeth, the bedtime prayers, the science fairs. He had skipped the foundation and now wanted the finished house. "She's old enough to decide," I told him, because I refused to be the gatekeeper of his redemption. That was between him and her. When I told Naomi he had reached out, she didn't react the way I expected. She didn't get excited. She didn't get angry. She just got quiet. And when a child who grew up filling silence becomes quiet, you pay attention. "Do you want to see him?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "I don't know what I'd say." That right there, that's the cost of absence. Not hatred, not rage, just unfamiliarity. They met at a coffee shop the following Saturday. Neutral ground. I sat in the car across the street, not because I didn't trust her, but because motherhood doesn't retire. After an hour, Naomi came out. She got in the passenger seat, buckled her seatbelt, and stared straight ahead. "Well?" I asked softly. She exhaled. "He talks like he knows me." That sentence pierced me. He said he's proud of who I've become, but he doesn't know how I became this. There it was, the quiet wound. Pride without participation. She wasn't angry. She was detached, and detachment is colder than anger. Over the next year, Marcus tried. Phone calls, occasional visits, birthday dinners. But the rhythm was off. They were two people trying to build history backward, and you can't reverse engineer intimacy. Then something unexpected happened. During Naomi's senior year of high school, Marcus was diagnosed with high blood pressure and early heart issues, stress-related from what I heard. Life has a way of pressing on the same heart that once refused pressure. He started calling more frequently after that. His tone shifted, less performative, more reflective. One evening, he asked if he could attend Naomi's high school graduation. Now let me pause here, because this was different. Graduation wasn't just another birthday. It was a milestone, a visible testimony of years he didn't witness. Naomi thought about it for 2 days before answering, and when she finally did, her response surprised both of us. She said yes, but not for the reason you might think. And what happened at that graduation was the first crack in the composure Marcus had been hiding behind for 18 years. But it wasn't the moment that broke him. That moment would come later, on a Sunday morning in my church. Graduation day arrived bright and humid, the kind of day where the air feels thick with endings and beginnings all at once. Naomi looked beautiful in her navy cap and gown, calm, composed, the same quiet strength she had carried since childhood. Marcus arrived early. I saw him before he saw us. He looked smaller. Not physically, just energetically. You ever see someone who used to fill a room, now trying not to take up space? That was him. When Naomi walked across that stage and they called her name, Naomi Williams, honors graduate, I stood up clapping before I realized tears were already sliding down my face because I remembered everything. The night shifts, the science projects, the drum set headaches, the questions at the kitchen table. I built this moment brick by brick. Marcus clapped too, but his applause looked different. It wasn't celebration, it was realization. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for pictures. Marcus approached us slowly. "Congratulations," he said to Naomi, his voice tight. She smiled politely. "Thank you." He hesitated. Then he said something unexpected. "I don't deserve to be here, but I'm grateful you let me come." Now that was the first honest sentence I'd heard from him in years. Naomi studied him for a moment. Then she said quietly, "I didn't invite you because you deserved it." He blinked. "I invited you because I didn't want to carry resentment into my future." Oh, oh. I had to look away because that was growth I didn't teach with words. That was something she forged herself. Marcus swallowed hard. I missed a lot, he said. Naomi nodded. Yes, you did. No yelling, no drama, just truth laid flat between them. And sometimes truth hits harder when it's calm. We took one photo together, the three of us, not as a reunited family, just as three people connected by history. Later that evening, Naomi said something that stayed with me. He looks tired, Mom. I knew what she meant. Regret ages you. Over the next few months, Marcus began reaching out more frequently, not just to Naomi, but to me, asking about her college plans, offering small financial help, trying in his own awkward way to insert himself responsibly. And I noticed something else. His tone had changed. No excuses, no blame, no rewriting history. Just wait. Then one Saturday afternoon, he asked if he could visit our church. Our church, the place that carried me through 18 years of silent rebuilding. I almost said no, because some spaces feel sacred in a way that protects your healing. But Naomi surprised me again. Let him come, she said. He should see what held us together. And that Sunday morning, when those church doors opened, Marcus walked in, and within 15 minutes, he was no longer holding himself together. Sunday mornings had always been sacred to me, not just because of the sermon, but because of what that building held. It held my tears when Naomi was a newborn, and I didn't know how I'd afford daycare. It held my silent prayers when bills were stacked like Jenga blocks, threatening to fall. It held my gratitude when Naomi got her college acceptance letter. That church didn't just witness my faith, it carried it. So when Marcus walked through those double wooden doors, I felt something shift in the air. He stepped inside cautiously, like a man entering a place he wasn't sure he belonged. And maybe he wasn't sure. The choir was already singing, soft at first, then rising. There's something about gospel music that doesn't just enter your ears, it enters your memory. Marcus scanned the room, probably noticing what I noticed years ago. Families sitting together, fathers with their arms around daughters, grandmothers fanning themselves dramatically even though the air conditioning was working just fine. Naomi leaned over and whispered to me, "He looks nervous." I replied quietly, "Conviction will do that." Now, before you think I was being smug, I wasn't. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is heavy, and I had long ago decided I preferred to travel light. The pastor began preaching from a passage about restoration. Now listen, if you've ever been in church long enough, you know how sermons sometimes feel suspiciously personal, like somebody done told the pastor your business. He spoke about absence, about fathers who leave and later realize what they forfeited, about how forgiveness doesn't erase consequence. And I saw it happen. Marcus shifted in his seat, first subtle, then restless. His breathing changed. His hands clasped tighter. The pastor said, "You can ask God for a second chance, but you cannot demand people pretend the first chance didn't matter." That sentence landed. I didn't look at Marcus immediately, but Naomi did, and what she saw made her reach for my hand. Tears. Not polite tears, not a single cinematic drop, but the kind that break through before you can stop them. He tried to wipe them away discreetly, but emotion doesn't respect pride. And then the choir began singing again, "Lord, restore what I broke." And that was it. Marcus bent forward, covered his face, and broke down crying, not quietly, not controlled. 18 years of delayed accountability spilling out in one moment. The man who said he needed peace looked anything but peaceful.
People around him shifted awkwardly, but nobody judged, because church has a way of holding broken people without interrogation. Naomi squeezed my hand tighter, and she whispered something I didn't expect. "Mom, I don't hate him." That right there, that was my real victory. But what happened after service, in the small prayer room behind the sanctuary, is what finally closed a chapter I thought would stay open forever. After the final hymn, people began filing out slowly, some offering Marcus gentle pats on the shoulder. Nobody asked questions. Church folks know when something sacred is unfolding. Marcus didn't move at first. He just sat there, face red, eyes swollen, breathing like a man who had finally stopped running. Naomi stood. "I'll be in the fellowship hall," she said softly. And then it was just him and me, for the first time in 18 years. He looked up at me, really looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me. "I was a coward," he said. "No defensiveness, no qualifiers, just truth." And here's something I didn't expect. Hearing him say it didn't feel victorious. It felt heavy, because acknowledgement doesn't rewind time. "I thought I was overwhelmed," he continued, "but I was selfish. I told myself you'd be fine, that you were strong." I let out a quiet breath. "Strength isn't permission to abandon someone," I replied. That landed gently. He nodded. "I missed her childhood," he said, voice cracking. "I missed you becoming this." I almost smiled at that, because this wasn't accidental. This was built in tears and overtime shifts and whispered prayers at 2 a.m. "I needed peace," he whispered again, almost ashamed. "And I thought you were the storm." There it was, the confession behind the confession. I looked at him calmly. "I wasn't the storm, Marcus. I was the responsibility." Silence. The kind that doesn't ache, just settles. "I can't get those years back," he said. "No," I agreed, "you can't." That wasn't cruelty. That was reality. He wiped his face again. "Is there anything I can do now?" Now. That word carries weight when it arrives late. I thought about that carefully, because forgiveness isn't emotional, it's intentional. "You can show up," I said finally, "consistently, without performance, without trying to erase the past. Just be steady." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he added. I surprised both of us with my answer. "I forgave you years ago." His eyes widened. "Not for you," I continued, "for me, and for her. Bitterness would have shaped her more than your absence did." And that was the truth. He broke again, but quieter this time. Not explosive grief, just humbled regret. We walked into the prayer room together. Not as husband and wife, not as enemies, just as two people acknowledging the cost of choices. Naodi joined us a few minutes later, and what she said in that small room shifted something permanently, because healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like boundaries spoken without anger. And her words, they were clear. Naomi stepped into that small prayer room and looked at both of us. Not like a child, like a woman. She took a slow breath before speaking. "I don't need a different past," she said carefully. "I just need honesty in my present." Marcus nodded immediately. "You have that," he whispered. She continued, steady and composed. "I won't pretend we're close. We're not, and that's okay. But if you're going to be in my life now, it has to be real. No disappearing, no dramatic speeches, just consistency. No anger, no raised voice, just boundaries."
And let me tell you something, especially to the women listening who raised children alone. When your child can speak truth without venom, you did something right. Marcus agreed. No negotiations, no excuses. Just agreement. We prayed together before leaving that room, and for the first time in 18 years, the three of us stood side by side, not pretending to be whole, but acknowledging the cracks. Now, here's what I want you to understand. That Sunday didn't magically restore a family. Marcus didn't move back. We didn't rewrite history. There was no cinematic reconciliation. Life isn't a movie. Healing is quieter than that. Over the next year, Marcus showed up more consistently. Monthly lunches, phone calls that didn't feel forced, a few awkward holidays that slowly became less awkward. Was it perfect? No. Was it enough? For Naomi, yes. For me, closure isn't about getting someone back. It's about getting yourself back. And I had already done that long before he walked into that church. But watching him break down, that wasn't revenge. That wasn't triumph. That was consequence meeting clarity. He once said he needed peace. What he didn't understand was this: peace doesn't come from leaving responsibility. Peace comes from facing it. 18 years earlier, I sat on the edge of my bed, pregnant, abandoned, terrified, and made a decision not to beg someone to love me. And that decision shaped everything that followed. So if you're listening right now, if someone walked away while you were carrying more than your fair share, if you built something alone while they searched for peace, let me say this gently. Their leaving was not proof of your lack. It was proof of their limitation. And one day, maybe not 18 years later, maybe sooner, life will sit them down in a place they can't run from, not to humiliate them, but to show them what they forfeited. As for me, I don't regret those years. They built a woman who doesn't crumble when doors close. They raised a daughter who speaks truth with grace. And they taught a man that tears delayed are heavier than tears shed on time. And that Sunday morning, when Marcus sat in my church and broke down crying, it wasn't the end of a love story. It was the end of denial. And sometimes, that's the real redemption. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about resilience, dignity, and quiet justice. Because some lessons don't come with applause, they come with peace.